What's up everyone, and welcome to the channel. So in today's video, we are going to start on getting the proper stance for my Toyota GR86. So this is a relatively inexpensive part that you can add with your vehicle still stock. As you can tell, these are the stock wheels and tires for the GR86, but this is also a good starting point to really dial in the stance that you are looking to get. So I have right here from Fitment Industries, these are wheel spacers. I have 25 millimeters for the rear and 20 for the front. Now, these stock tires here are all the same. They're all 215 45 17s. So I have a square setup on this vehicle, but as you just heard, the wheel spacers are different sizes. And as I trip over some of the tools I have for today, the reason that I'm doing that is because there's a little bit different of a wheel gap, of course, from the front fender flare to the back fender flare, where this also has a little bit of that aerodynamic piece there, where I want that tire to come out a little bit farther than up front. So we are going to start off with using the piece that I just tripped over as a measuring tool to see the before and after differences with these tires. But let's just take a quick look at where they are in relation to this piece too. As you can tell, it's kind of to the right of that aerodynamic piece. So it's definitely tucked up in there a lot. And then if we work our way up front where this reflector is, they are pretty much on the inside there, tucked in just a little bit. We also have some pretty big wheel gap that we need to fix, and that will be coming in the next video. So I'm basically using these spacers as something to utilize the stock wheels and tires with the setup, and then once I'm ready to figure out what wheels I want to go with, what offset I need, and even what size tire too. Because you can put on some wider tires for the rear of this 86. So this is a perfect way to get the fitment going, lower the vehicle, get your stance right, and then you can decide where you want to go from there, or you can leave it, as I'm going to be doing for quite some time. So the first measurement that I want to take before we put on the 20 millimeter spacers, of course, that is going to move everything out 20 millimeters as you would expect. But I just want to see where that difference is with the fender liner here. So I have my piece of wood that I'm going to touch on both sides of the tire. So it's not actually touching the rim, but it's going to touch the tire both on the top and the bottom. So that way we know that this is perfectly straight and in line with the tire. So from there, I can measure, I'm gonna use this side. From there, I can measure right in the middle of the tire where the tire lines up right now. So make a little bit of a mark there. That'll be our reference point for where that tire is. That's how much, or that's how far it is currently in from the fender liner. So we have maybe about a 1/4 inch in. So we have a lot to work with that spacer. Now, if you've never put spacers on a vehicle before, go ahead and loosen up the lug nuts before you get the car off the ground, so that way you don't have to worry about doing that. And with the last lug nut loose, we can pull this tire off. It should be pretty lightweight, so it shouldn't be hard to do. And there we go. And also, if you've never done this before, the jack points for the 86, there's one just behind the front tire and then just in front of the back tire. Very thin strip. If you place that right in the middle of your jack, you can easily lift the car up. If you don't have any ground effects kits like this, you can do it straight from the ground. I had to put the vehicle up on ramps in order to get my jack underneath. But from here, we have our 20 millimeter spacer now. For my car, it has less than 1,000 miles on it, so I don't need to worry about really cleaning the surface of this hub. If you have an older vehicle, you've got some miles on it, there's some rust maybe that's on here, go ahead and take a wire brush and just clean that surface, so that way you have some good contact between the spacer and that hub. And it's just as easy as that. I also have some Loctite that I will be using just to put on some of these threads. Since you won't be able to gain access to these unless you take your tires off, that's just going to give you a little bit more confidence that of course they're on. Make sure you torque them properly too, just depending on your vehicle's torque specs. Every car is going to have a little bit different of a torque spec, but from here, it's as easy as putting all these on. And then since my tire iron is too big to fit in here, I grabbed a 17 millimeter socket, and I'm going to go in a star pattern just like you would when you're tightening down the tire, because this does have some wiggle to it. So you just want to make sure that pretty much all of these are centered That way you can get the socket in there. And then as you can tell, finishing up this one, as I try to tighten these, you'll notice that I can't because the disc is rotating backwards, which means I need to have someone put their foot on the brake or use something heavy to hold the brake pedal so that way I can torque these down. So this is the easy part, just putting the lug nuts back on. And I would recommend, if you're adding wheel spacers to your vehicle, you want to at least check them once a year, if not more. Usually I'd say every oil change or once, maybe twice a year, just to make sure everything is torqued properly. And that Loctite is going to help aid in that too. So there's a safe way to use wheel spacers if you do everything correctly. Onto the rear tire now. Let's do that same test just to see where these line up. And honestly, I don't even think I need to mark this because we are just at this board lining up with the inside of the fender arch here. So I don't even need to mark it. When we put on the spacer, this piece of wood should be able to go straight up. So that's one half of the car done. Before I go ahead and finish up the other side and then show you that wood measurement that I did earlier, let's take a look at the before versus the after. So on the driver's side, with that piece that I mentioned earlier, check out how much of the tire pokes out past that trim piece. And then as we work our way to the bottom where this piece goes, you can go to that second line, or at least see part of that second line from down below. So look at how much tire is poking out on this side. And then we come over to this side, drastically different with that piece up here. There was tire poking out past that piece. And then in the lower section, you can barely see the first line running through that tire. So right here again, a little bit of tire, and then obviously a lot more. So looking good so far in the rear. Up front, we have that same angle with that reflector. Earlier, you couldn't even see that tire. Now we have a good bit poking out, just for reference again with before. Just a sliver of that tire. All right, we are back to final measurements now on this back tire. Like I mentioned earlier, we can go straight up. So it was just barely touching the wood. Now we have maybe like a 1/4 inch outside of this fender flare. So when I drop the car and lower it, a little bit of camber, we should be at a really good fitment. And up front, if you remember, we had about a 1/4 inch with this piece of wood. Now we are like a sheet of papers outside the fender. So I can't even mark on the wood because it's just outside. But again, when the car's lowered, we're gonna have a really nice wheel tuck right there. And so just like that, we have changed the stance for the BR86 with the stock wheel and tire setup. I think it looks really good. I went for a quick drive. There's no rubbing up front, and of course, nothing in the rear. So far so good. So I think it looks really good. It's definitely making that wheel gap seem like it's a little bit smaller. But I have a box behind that door to fix that wheel gap. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that next video. Also, be sure to check out Fitment Industries so you can get a set of these Eibach wheel spacers for any of your vehicles that you have and you want to get with a really nice stance. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the GR86. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the suspension video coming next. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a huge thumbs up. Consider smashing that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on our daily uploads. I will see you all in the next video.